Dear students, in today's class we will study the moderate phase and the extremist phase of Indian national movement. The foundation of Congress in December 1885 was followed by the phase of moderate politics or the moderate phase. This phase was followed by the emergence of extremist leaders like Pal Lal, and that was known as the extremist phase of Indian national movement. Let us start the moderate phase of national movement with introduction. Congress was established in December 1885. Foundation of Congress was one of the most significant developments in the history of modern India. Congress spearheaded the anti-British struggle, and over the period of time, different ideas or different philosophies became dominant in Congress. The first philosophy that became dominant was the philosophy of moderate politics. Or we say moderate phase of national struggle. Second phase that was followed by moderates was the extremist phase, or the phase of extremist politics. Moderate phase was from 1885 to 1905. Extremist phase was from 1905 to 1919. Extremist phase was followed by Gandhian phase. Mahatma Gandhi returned from South Africa in 1915, and during 1919-20, Gandhiji emerged as the supreme leader of Indian national struggle. So emergence of Gandhiji as the supreme leader of national struggle marked the beginning of a new phase, that is Gandhian phase of national movement. Gandhian phase was followed by socialist phase. In fact, Gandhian phase and the socialist phase were concurrent for a long period of time. Socialism became a dominant phenomenon in around 1928. So from 1928 around to 1947 was the period of socialist phase. So all these phases we'll see one by one. In today's class, moderate phase and extremist phase will be covered here. And later on in other classes we'll move to Gandhian phase, socialist phase of national struggle. There was another ideology in Indian national movement, and that was the ideology of revolutionary extremism. So revolutionary extremist phase will also be studied as the topic number 5 or the issue number 5 in phases of national struggle. This was outside Congress. This philosophy became a dominant phenomenon beginning in 1897 when Chapekar brothers tried to kill Mr. Rand, the hated Commissioner of Plague Committee, or the Chief Commissioner of Plague. That will be studied. So moderate, followed by extremist, followed by Gandhian. At the same time or after some time, socialism emerged. This was again parallel to all of them. So let us start with moderate phase. Who are the prominent leaders in moderate phase? This phase was characterized by the guidance of leaders like Gopal, Krishna, Gokhale. He was a prominent leader, most prominent leader Dadabhai Naoroji. Firoz Shah Mehta. S.N. Banerjee. W.C. Banerjee, the first president of Congress. All these were the prominent leaders of moderate phase. They were the prominent moderate leaders in Indian national movement. Dadabhai Naoroji, the greatest, famously known as the Grand Old Man of India, was the president of Congress many times. Gopal Krishna Gokhale, another prominent leader belonging to moderate phase. S.N. Banerjee, he was also a very prominent inspiration. He was also a very big leader in moderate phase. So these were the leaders of moderate phase. If you look at the nature and character of national movements during moderate phase, you need to ask the question, what kind of? So when we study nature and character, that's a very, very important issue in national struggle. What kind of national movement was there during moderate phase, or what kind of politics was the moderate politics? This what kind of question can be answered by keeping in mind the aims and objectives of moderate leaders by keeping in mind the methods used by moderate leaders, the outlook of moderate leaders towards British rule, that also reveal you the character of moderate politics, the success or the failure of moderates also need to be kept in mind. All these different dimensions as well as their social background need to be kept in mind to understand or to answer the question of nature and character of national movement during moderate phase. The first dimension of character, always the language has to be. The key word here is liberal. That's the only thing that you need to remember. Liberal. The language always has to be that liberalism was predominant in national movements during moderate phase, one way of saying, or the national movement during moderate phase was liberal in character. As per your convenience, this is going to be the normal language in every point. Points are going to be many. So national movement was liberal in character, or liberalism was predominant in national movements during moderate phase. The movement was liberal in character because the demands raised by moderates were liberal. The methods used by moderates were liberal. What were the demands? They were demanding extension or enlargement of legislative councils, greater representation of Indians in legislative councils, greater association of Indians with the task of administration, simultaneous holding of civil services examination in India along with London, reduction in military expenditure, increase in developmental expenditure. So they were having moderate demands. They were not demanding Swaraj, or they were not demanding independence. There was no concept of independence at this time. They were just demanding reforms. Methods, they were using petitions, prayers, memorandums. So demands were liberal, methods were liberal. That is why we say national movement during moderate phase was liberal in character. National movement was progressive. These dimensions you have to understand very carefully once, because these dimensions will come back again under extremist, as well as under Gandhian phase, as well as under socialist and other phases. National movement during moderate phase was progressive in character, or progressive outlook was predominant in national struggle during moderate phase. Because the moderate leaders were guided by the vision of a better and brighter future. So progressive means having a better vision of future. The moderate leaders were guided by the vision of a better and brighter future. They were forward-looking. Think of peasant and tribal revolts. The peasant and tribal revolts, the revolt of 1857, those were backward-looking initiatives. But here, the moderate leaders were progressive. They demanded reforms. And when reforms were undertaken by government, the moderates supported reforms. So they were fighting for reforms. They were having a vision of a better and brighter future. They were looking towards future rather than turning their face towards past. So national movement was progressive, or the moderate leaders were progressive in their outlook. Depending on the language of question, you have to pick up your own language. National movement was non-violent during moderate phase because peaceful methods were used by moderates. The moderates believed in efficacy of peaceful methods. They had no faith in efficacy of violent methods, so they used peaceful methods. They believed in effectiveness of peaceful methods, so national movement was non-violent. Aggression or radicalism was absent. They were peace-loving people. The national movement was democratic in character during moderate phase because moderates were fighting for a democratic political system, a democratic social system in India. Democracy means, try to think of definition of democracy. Democratic system means something that is inclusive, something that is non-discriminatory. So moderates were supporters of democracy, and once they were supporters of democracy, they believed that democratic social system, democratic political system would be in the interest of everyone. Democracy was considered as the key to resolve the problems of India. Democracy was considered as the key to guide India onto the path of a better and brighter future, onto the path of social, economic, and cultural progress. So they were democratic in their outlook. The national movement was egalitarian in outlook, because moderates believed in equality of all, equality of every human being. The moderates were guided by the principle that all human beings were born equal. This philosophy of equality that moderates carried forward, that moderates believed in, was even better, was even far more advanced than the philosophy prevailing in America as well as in Europe. When the American Revolution took place, the Americans were saying that all men are born equal or were born equal. That was the sentence put forward. That's the opening sentence of the book of John Locke. John Locke was the father of English glorious revolution that took place in England in 1688. The philosophy of John Locke influenced George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and other intellectuals associated with the American Revolution. They believed in the idea that all men were born equal. In fact, this idea of men also, for those Americans and for the Europeans, was white men, or only whites. But the Indian leaders were far ahead when we compare them with the Western counterparts of that time as well as of previous ages. The moderates believed in the philosophy that all human beings were born equal, whether somebody is black, somebody is white, somebody is yellow, or somebody is brown, whether somebody is male or somebody is female. Everyone was equal in the eyes of moderates. So they believed in that idea of equality, and they were fighting for equality with Europeans, because the European rule in India, the British rule in India, was racist in outlook. So they were opposing racism in the strongest possible way. The national movement during moderate phase was secular. Secular here means that there was no differentiation or discrimination on the basis of religion. This secular character of moderate politics can be seen in the form of the fact that Hindus, Muslims, Parsis, as well as Christians, all were part of Congress during moderate phase, of course, during later phases also. But here, since the topic is moderate, so you see, during moderate phase. First 4 presidents of Congress were from 4 different religions. So there was no discrimination in Congress on the basis of religion. There was no discrimination in national movement on the basis of religion. Everyone was welcome in that. And that can be seen in the form of the presidents of Congress. First 4 presidents of Congress were from 4 different religions. W.C. Banerjee was Hindu. Dadabhai Nauroji was a Parsi. Badruddin Tayyabji was a Muslim. And number 4, George Yule was a Christian. So everyone was involved in Congress activities during moderate phase. The national movement during moderate phase was urban in terms of its geographical spread. The villages were yet to come under the influence of nationalism. So nationalism was yet to reach villages. Nationalism was largely an urban phenomenon during moderate phase. That's why you say moderate politics was urban politics. The moderates were urbanites, or the national movement was urban in character. Most of moderate leaders were Western educated. And because of the fact that they were Western educated, most of these leaders were Westernized in their outlook. Western ideas were popular among moderates. moderates were looking towards the West when they were trying to find out the meaning of modernity, or when they were trying to find out the ultimate destination of Indian nationalist struggle. So they were westernized in their outlook. They drew inspiration from Western ideas. They were looking towards West to get guidance, to get inspiration. In terms of their social background, or in terms of its social background, the national movement was elitist in nature. Elitist means most of the moderate leaders were coming from upper middle class and upper class of Indian society. Lawyers, landlords, and other professionals were predominant in Congress during moderate phase. So they were not common people. They were belonging to the rich classes of Indian society. That is why we say national movement during moderate phase was elitist in character, or in terms of its social background, the national movement during moderate phase was elitist in nature. The national movement was non-sectarian. Non-sectarian means there was no focus on issues related to any particular class. The meaning here is that the moderates knew that peasants were suffering. The moderates knew that factory workers were suffering. It's not that they were not aware of sufferings of people, but moderates did not raise demands for any particular section of population or for any particular class of Indian population. Why? This class bias was deliberately avoided to maintain unity. Most of moderate leaders were coming from upper class or the upper sections of Indian population. Most of them were lawyers or landlords or other professionals. So if you have landlords in your team and you want their support, then you cannot really condemn them, you cannot really attack them for exploiting peasants. If you have industrialists in your team and if you want their support, if you want them to sit with you across the table, then you cannot keep on abusing them for exploiting the workers. So they knew that peasants and workers were suffering, but to maintain unity among all, that was the early phase of nationalist struggle. The Indian nationalists knew that if they kept on fighting with each other, then they cannot challenge, or they would never be successful in challenging the British rule. So to maintain unity, class issues were deliberately avoided, or the class bias was deliberately avoided by Indian nationalists during moderate phase. That is why we say national movement was non-sectarian. Number 11, national movement was constitutionalist in outlook, because constitutional methods of agitation were adopted or were used by moderate leaders in their fight against British rule. What were these constitutional methods of struggle? Petitions, memorandums, prayers. The moderates also used the platform of legislative council to raise their voice. They also used press, newspapers and journals were also used by them to raise their voice, to raise their issues, to impress upon the British that reforms must be undertaken for the betterment of Indians. So they were constitutionalist in their outlook because their methods were constitutional in nature. Belief in efficacy of British rule. This you have to understand very carefully. Belief in efficacy of British rule was another important feature of national movements during moderate phase. The moderates believed that the British rule was good for India. moderates believed that British rule was good for India and the British rule should continue. They wanted to strengthen British rule. They supported the continuation of British rule in India because they did not understand that British rule was essentially colonial. What they opposed here was un-British rule. The moderates supported British rule, but they opposed un-British rule. They wanted a rule similar to the one existing in London in India also. So they believed that British rule was good. Moderates did not oppose British rule. They supported British rule. They wanted British rule should continue in India. In fact, they worked to strengthen the British rule in India. So that appears to be quite contradictory. But this contradiction was the result of the fact that moderates could not understand that British rule was essentially colonial and exploitative. Belief in British sense of justice and fairness was another important feature of moderate nationalism. The moderates believed that British were good people. They believed that the British wanted to do justice to India. The British did not want any kind of exploitation of India. The British seriously wanted to do justice to India. The moderates were under the impression that whatever problems Indians are having, whatever sufferings Indians were going through, these sufferings and problems were the result of the fact that the senior British officers were not aware of the sufferings of people. The moderates were of the opinion, they were under the impression that if the problems of Indians could be highlighted properly, if these problems could be raised effectively, if these problems could be brought to the notice of the senior officers such as governors and governor general, then definitely corrective steps would be taken by the government to help the masses. So they believed in British sense of justice and fairness. They believed that British were good people and they wanted to do something good to India. The moderates believed in British sense of justice and fairness, but at the same time they opposed colonial exploitation of India. The exploitation of Indian resources was condemned. The moderates opposed the colonial character of British rule. The problem with moderates was that they could not understand that British rule and colonial rule were two faces of the same coin. They could not understand that British came to India essentially to exploit Indian resources. They could not see through the facade or the mask put on by British that they were trying to do justice to India. They could not understand the reality of white man's burden and the British providential mission. So white man's burden means that the white man was having the burden to uplift the natives. British providential mission means the God had commanded the British to come to India and to uplift the Indians from darkness to light, to guide Indians from barbarism to civilization, to take Indians to the path of democracy, progress and prosperity. So these notions or high theories were being used by the British to justify their rule in India, but these were just mask or facade. These were just a kind of covering to hide the reality. The moderates could not see through this covering. This mask had befooled them. They were under the impression that British rule was essentially good, and whatever colonial exploitation was there, this colonial exploitation was the result of misuse of power by some officers. That the British government did not want to exploit Indians. Some officers, Indian as well as British, were misusing their power to exploit the people. They could not understand that this misuse was an essential feature of British rule, or colonial exploitation was the inherent attribute of British rule. Without colonialism, there was nothing in British rule. It was essentially exploitative. Economic critic of British rule was the main identity of moderate politics. The moderates analyzed different dimensions of economic impact of British rule on India. Drain theory put forward by Dadabhai Nauroji M.G. Ranade and R.C. Dutt exposed the true colonial character of British rule.